Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/Cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat. Yes, we do read that chat. Yes. We always are looking to involve you into the show. It's not just the mailbag episodes. It's every single time we get together, and very excited that we've got a bunch of you joining us here right now. If you're listening to us later or watching us later on YouTube, thank you so much. Always, we appreciate you hanging out with us. We've got one of our favorite episodes of the offseason as we will finally – I mean, of course, we're probably jinxing this, but we're going to say the coaching carousel is done, at least at the head coaching level. We got another wave of assistant movement before we really start to recap and dive into the assistant coaching carousel. But one of our things that we are going to be getting into today is breaking down some of the hires that stood out to us, some of the stories that stood out among the 24 coaching changes that took place at the FBS level during the 2022-2023 offseason. First, want to begin with we'll just go right off the top since y'all are asking. Tournament bracket in the chat asks, Bud, what do you think about Nico and Danny White making the same salary for the Vols, $2.2 million annually?
Tournament bracket, like that is the most SEO name grab for a YouTube username ever. That is fantastic. I think this is an interesting question here, right? So I would think the quarterback is probably worth more, but Danny White has done a great job at UCF. He's done a great job at Tennessee so far. Even the hire, like, do we really think Josh Heupel was his number one choice? I don't. It still worked out. That's great. Like I thought, in worst case, they'll be exciting on offense, score a lot of points, and we'll see what the sanctions do. Best case, he works out. So far, it's been best case. Nico, though, is a really, really special tools-wise quarterback prospect. He would be like one of the very best volleyball players in the country if he was going to play college volleyball. He's like an Olympic level volleyball player. If you want to kind of put it in that context, the guy's body control is nuts. He has a huge arm, really, really toolsy, and you're always going to pay for the guys that can make special things happen on the field.
Does Danny White make too much? I'm not going to count someone else's money, but I mean,
you can't pay the players out of your TV money, so you got to go to someone. Are you going to pay Josh Heupel $11 million? Might as well pay the AD something.
You've already put like water slides in the facilities. You've got like 1,000 bench presses. You've got all the weights you're ever going to need. So like that money, it's just sitting there and it has to go somewhere. And the collectives pay the players. So yeah, I don't know the stat, but I think he's now like a top 8 paid athletic director in the country.
Number 1 in the SEC.
Yeah. So
I think he's underpaid. I think Danny White, because you are already setting yourself up for having to deal with like one side of this. They've got incredible fundraising. They've got so much passion. Their NIL collective is all like pooling together all this money, and he's done a good job of helping oversee all of this operation. But if things start to turn sour, whose number they're calling. The guy that cut that big check, he thinks he can go right to Danny's office. So you're going to have to be the one to answer to it. It's going to be a little difficult if some of those big boosters decide that they have the good ideas for how to fix something. And so, when you have to manage those personalities and you have to manage those power brokers, it could be a difficult task.
How much does the school president make?
I imagine it is 6 figures easy. And if it is close to $1 million, I would not be surprised.
So let's just say the school president's making $750,000, which is pretty nice. And your athletic director's making $2.2 million. So he's making about 3 times as much.
At Tennessee, that makes sense.
Who's in charge? I'm just saying, who's in charge?
What do they say? The football program is the front porch of the university?
Yeah, it's optically, it is weird to me that it's the football people and the athletic people making more at the state schools than anybody else. Just let that sink in a little bit.
There's a lot of stuff that's weird about the college sports apparatus. Yes. Producer Jordan, who is a huge Tennessee fan, as you know, we're a Tennessee podcast as well, apparently. He says they are top 6 in every revenue sport. which I'm assuming that's basketball and football. Does Tennessee make money in baseball or women's hoops?
Women's hoops, maybe.
He says
The baseball probably has pretty good
yes.
turnout too.
Yeah, baseball
Look,
probably.
If you're just not in women's hoops, okay, so just the three revenue in sports. But like I assume that Tennessee doesn't lose horrendous amounts of money on women's basketball. So like that's at least a plus compared to what a lot of schools do.
Basketball doesn't lose a lot of money anyway, right? Isn't it a low investment, like relatively to everything else that you've got?
It's a lot of travel.
Yeah. And you got to pay those players to come now. I mean,
At what point, though, to Chip, like what point does going to the boosters and asking them to give to the collectives after you've already been going to them for decades to put their names on buildings, to put up locker rooms, to give all those things, do they start looking around and realize, wait, we're paying Heupel $9 million and we could be spending some of that money to players? Like at some point, I do think it's going to have that transition, and maybe it's, I don't know. I just think it's a fascinating dynamic that somebody hasn't figured out yet. Been like, yeah, let's instead of paying our coach where he's already handsomely paid and he's already, at least adequately paid, we could be building our roster for him even more so. That's
Bud's angle of the look at
coming.
NFL player salaries to NFL coach salaries and the way that those two things are set up. Because I know, Bud, your argument's always in why a player would be worth that. The other side is that the coaches are not worth that and that you end up bringing those down. That if we have true collective bargaining, do you forecast that we would see coaching salaries come down?
I don't know about come down, but I do think that you would see a drastic reduction in inflation over the coming years. You would not see guys getting to that 15, 20 million range like they're currently pacing to do.
You guys realize Zach Taylor is on the verge of potentially his second Super Bowl in a row, and what he's done to this franchise and brought them. I think he makes $4 million a year, maybe $5 million.
I mean, don't we think how many coaches could do what he's doing with Burrow and with Chase and all those dudes? Like they drafted super high for a lot of years. That's kind of what the Bills GM said yesterday. They're like, well, you needed Jamar Chase. He's like, yeah, I don't want to suck bad enough to have a pick that allows me to pick Jamar Chase. Right.
Yeah, but I think coaches matter way more in the NFL, and yet they're not paid as much as college coaches are. Like he doesn't have a talent. He has an incredible quarterback, and he's got an incredible receiver, and he's got a good team. But like the disparity between the Bengals and anybody on their roster is nowhere near the disparity that's, even Tennessee versus, this teams that they have better talent than Kentucky, Vanderbilt, in the East alone.
He did have that Bills defense reeling in that first half.
Yeah. We did see some numbers, by the way, that like the highest paid NFL coaches are definitely making more than highest paid college coaches.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sean
14,
Payton
15.
Not all of them. Like the disparity seems to be greater. Like the 30th NFL coach does not make as much as the 30th college coach. But the top guys like a Belichick, Sean Payton, whatever the guy is at the Rams.
Payton's about to get 20.
Yeah,
right.
To coach the Cowboys. You don't think it's going to happen?
I don't know. I think he's going to the Broncos. That's just me.
Do you think Jerry Jones would let somebody that wants as much control as Sean Payton coach the Cowboys?
But if Jerry Jones ever actually wants to win, he probably should consider it.
I think Jerry wants to win Jerry's way.
Yeah.
Speaking of money, LSU has accidentally overpaid Brian Kelly by $1 million in 2022. They're playing as a university. And by the way, LSU is like financial concerns around the Louisiana State University system has. This is not a
maybe
new,
now we know why.
This is not a new story. And they say they're going to try to recoup it by 2023. Has this ever happened to y'all? And would you give the money back?
I have never accidentally been paid $1 million. No. And if I had been paid $1 million accidentally, I probably wouldn't even notice because I already get paid so much more than that as it is. So, whatever. No, no, hell yeah, I would probably give it back. Because if I'm accidentally getting paid $1 million, I'm probably pretty okay.
you have to give it back if you work for a state school. Like the state will definitely come after you if you don't.
Would Brett Favre give it back?
No.
Would you give it back or would you? So I would set it aside. I wouldn't spend it.
Yeah, you take a little bit
off
of
right there.
Paychecks.
And then the question is, how long do you wait? Like, how long do you think you're in the clear? Like, is it a few years? And then you're like, now you can splurge? Or is it 7 years? Like, what's the statute of limitations there on when they could get it? That's probably what I would do. Is just kind of set it aside. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got it. I've been waiting for you to call me. Here you go. Here's your money back.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know where to give it.
I'm going to need
somewhere along those lines.
I'm going to need another couple of months. It's not liquid right now. I'm going to need another couple of months.
Did you guys see the details of the? There was 6.7. There was also 6.7 misclassified in severance payments as coaching salaries, benefits, and bonuses on its statement of revenues and expenses. Now, if I was fired and they overpaid me in a severance payment, we might be talking about something different. We might try to keep it a little bit longer and maybe try to fight for it.
So that means either like Les Miles' money went to Ed Orgeron or Ed Orgeron's money went to Les Miles, and they've got it. And it's like, and then you know what I would do? I would just let them sort it out. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys have to go and figure that out. Brian Kelly will.
Do you think he noticed?
No.
Direct deposit, man. How many
Yeah.
times are you checking your bank account to see exactly what amount was put in there?
Every 2 weeks.
Actually, I should be better about that. Because,
Yeah, maybe I should be too.
I've had the opposite. Where like the raise should have come through. And you're like, wait a second. Wasn't this number supposed to change?
I'm looking at deductions.
Yeah.
Wait, how much was I given there?
Yeah.
Did somebody who Brian Kelly pays to manage his money notice? Because I bet you Brian Kelly doesn't check his own checking account. But he probably has somebody who's his financial.
Did you see how it went? So he has an LLC and they were double paying. So they were paying his LLC and they were paying him personally, which I could see
That's a
that
good hustle.
unfolding. It's a great hustle.
Hi,
I'm Brian Kelly, Limited Liability Corporation. Nice to meet you.
Isn't the LLC how you like make the coaching clinics and when you do all the other
anything
stuff?
Non-employee related?
Yeah. Like all your Nike stuff, all of your coaching clinics, when you get to go on tour, when you get paid.
You guys don't have LLCs?
No, should I start one?
Yeah.
Can you help me?
Hey,
right,
I have other gigs though, so that's why I have one.
I launched an LLC for a production company maybe about 12, 13 years ago, but I am off of that LLC at this point. It had a history of problematic tweets, and Chip had to step away. I had to step away from that one. All right. So as I mentioned, one of our big things that we like to do every single offseason is pick a point and say, this is when it's time for us to look back and recap the entire coaching carousel. So in the 2022-2023 coaching carousel, we had 24 FBS jobs change hands. 11 of them were at the Power 5 level. 13 of them are at the Group of 5 level. Yes, I am counting Cincinnati as Power 5 because they're a Big 12 team for the 2023 season. Speaking of Cincinnati, Charlotte, FAU, Liberty, North Texas, UAB, 6 of the schools that had coaching changes are all going to be in new conferences coming up. Of the 11 Power 5 jobs, 7 of them were coach firings where they needed to replace them. More of a domino effect at Cincinnati, Louisville, and Purdue. And of course, tragically, Mississippi State's change coming in the wake of Mike Leach's death. Arizona State, Auburn, Cincinnati, Colorado, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Mississippi State, Nebraska, Purdue, Stanford, and Wisconsin. Those are your Power 5 jobs that changed hands. Charlotte, Coastal Carolina, FAU, Kent State, Liberty, Navy, North Texas, Texas State, Tulsa, UAB, UNLV, USF, and Western Michigan were the Group of 5 jobs that will have new head coaches going into the 2023 season. And now, over the next 4 hours, we will give detailed grades and breakdowns for every single one of these 24 head coaching changes. No, let's start up with just some general questions. What is your favorite hire of the cycle? Danny, why don't you get us started?
Favorite hire for me?
Yeah.
Luke Fickell going to Wisconsin. I think so. I think it was the right time for him to jump there. I think it's a program where he'll have a bigger profile, be able to recruit better than what's been there. And I think he's a player development guy. Like I think he's created NFL talent, what he did at Cincinnati. And I think he'll crush it at Wisconsin. Now the question is, crush it may not look this like they may not get to the Big Ten title game every year when they go away from divisions, but I think he's going to crush it. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if he cracks into that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State territory. Occasionally he will, but I don't think it's going to be like a perennial. There were some years where they had a nice stretch of Big Ten title runs. They get beat, but they still got there.
Yeah, you think he's capable pretty much of like putting Wisconsin where Wisconsin had been before it kind of started to fall off the last few years, where it might not be Ohio State or Michigan or whoever the best team in the conference is on a year-to-year basis, but it's always going to be up there with the best teams. It's going to be a perennially ranked kind of team going to big bowl games. And maybe in a great year, something special happens and they pick off a conference title.
I also think the fact that he's bringing in Phil Longo to run the offense, like, let's see if you can get it done in the cold. If you can, can you bring that out to Wisconsin? So I'm excited from that aspect because if it works, maybe you can shake things up and then you can take it to that next level.
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing about that hire to me, because there's a history of that offense not working very well in the Big Ten, and especially at Wisconsin, where the one thing that state and that region kind of produces with regularity are not the typical offensive linemen that play in those offenses. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that, with the transfer portal, with the way things are nationally recruiting now, it probably won't be as big of a deal as it had been in recent years, but it's still going to be interesting to watch.
Does Fickell have the war chest or the support? One thing we talked about in terms of his exit from Cincinnati was feeling like they were good at player evaluation, getting in on guys early, but then losing those battles late in the recruitment. Bud, do we think that at Wisconsin he's going to be able to have access to more resources and unlock some of that on the talent acquisition side of things?
I do. Yeah. Remember last summer, didn't Wisconsin make a play for Caleb Williams?
Yes.
Too? Like I think Wisconsin has leveled up its name, image, and likeness program some. I think NIL, or rather the lack of it, was one of the driving factors for Fickell leaving Cincinnati and going to Wisconsin. In addition to the fact that, sorry, Cincinnati fans, but history kind of shows when you join a new league, more often than not, you take the check, you take the losses that are coming. So his stock was probably going to drop in the near term at Cincinnati a little bit, even though I think we had all really appreciated what he had done when Cincy was a G5. So yeah, I think Wisconsin will be a bigger player in NIL, and they have to be if they want to compete in the new Big Ten, because that offense didn't always work. The fact that it didn't work in the Big Ten West, put that thing in the East and see that leads to more blowout losses rather than just close losses.
Yeah, I saw a note from ESPN's David Hale. He's a huge fan of the podcast. He was mentioning the most results by 21 points or more in conference games. The Big Ten, far and away. Some of it, they got 14 teams, but so does the ACC, so does the SEC. The Big Ten had 23 conference games decided by 21 points or more blowouts in 2022 in the Big Ten than anywhere else. I love this comment from William in the chat watching us live. He said it's his least favorite hire because it scares him as a Minnesota Golden Gophers fan. Bud, what was your
fraudulent ass Gophers?
Bud, what was your favorite hire?
So my favorite hire, I think, was Kenny Dillingham to Arizona State. Maybe not the best hire, but I think it's my favorite for a couple of reasons. One, Herm Edwards left a smoking crater coming out of Tempe. Like that program is not in good shape, or at least it was not. They really didn't recruit the high school level at all over the last 2 years. They weren't good. And so they are set up for a long rebuild. And I think if you're going to take a guy as young as Dillingham, who is the youngest head coach in college football, I'm fairly certain now, he's going to need some runway. He's probably going to make a couple of mistakes, but he's an Arizona State guy. That's a job I know for a long time that he has really kept an eye on. I think he's going to try to do a good job connecting with the local high schools. If you're going to go and hire the guy who really wants the job, the native son, if you will, I think going and taking a young dude like that, giving him some time to make some mistakes and make some improvements along the way, there's not going to be a lot of pressure to win early at Arizona State, given how bad that they've been and how the administration should at least understand just how negligent Herm Edwards and those guys were the last couple of years recruiting wise. And there's a decent chance they get hit with sanctions too, right? So I think having somebody you're going to give a lot of runway to negotiate it is the right move to make there. So I'm going to go Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State.
Yeah, and it's also my favorite hire. I'm in agreement on it for a lot of those reasons because, like, we talked about it when all these jobs were coming open, about when we were ranking them, like, what's the most attractive P5 jobs? And, like, Bud, you've talked about, too, the amount of people from California that are kind of moving to Arizona and that region. It's a growing population state, which means the high school talent in that state is going to start improving as these years go on. And Kenny Dillingham's taken over. And like you were saying, he's already kind of started to repair the relationships between Arizona State and those high schools that had kind of really deteriorated in the last few years. They're bringing a lot of local kids who left back via the transfer portal. They're kind of, trying to try to rebuild those relationships. And I think long term, like, I don't think Arizona State's going to be great in the next couple of seasons. I think it could get to a bowl game in a year or two. But I think that if you try to look at what the plan is here, Kenny Dillingham wanting to be there and wanting to be there for the long haul and the overall arching kind of picture of what they're trying to do, I think that this was one of the best hires. It's my favorite hire. It's going to be really interesting for me to watch. I can't wait.
I'm weirdly, I've got no stake in this, but if Jaden Rashada goes to Arizona State, that's a super fun sort of story to follow in terms of Rashada landing at a place with a young head coach who's done really good job with quarterbacks. Drew Pine is obviously already in there in that quarterback room, but that would be like, as Rashada's looking at his options, and what are we thinking? Like Arizona State, TCU, probably the two front runners there. Am I correct?
Yeah, like secondary options, Washington. I could see maybe some kind of sign and day shocker again with the Buffs. Don't think so, but I guess you can't rule it out. They do have a flair for the dramatic there in Colorado. So TCU and Arizona State, I think, are the two most likely at this point.
Yeah, if Dillingham was able to land that, then I think that would be the kind of, big, sell attraction, ways that you can continue to promote that program moving forward. What about Kenny Dillingham, not necessarily the best. What about the coach that is set up for immediate success? Like when we look at 2023, who of these 24 coaches do you think is best set up to win like right away, Tom?
Luke Fickell. I think that it's obviously they're bringing in Longo, a completely new offense, but they have a very good running back in Braylon Allen. He's taking over a team that talent-wise is pretty good. Defensively, they're still going to be pretty good if they need to. And like Phil Longo, you think of that offense as, like throwing the ball all over the place. You can run the ball just as effectively in that offense as you can throw it. And so I think that what you're probably going to see is they're going to lean more on Braylon Allen in the run game, spread things out. It's going to look different, but they're still going to be a very run-heavy football team next year. And I just think that given what that program has been the last couple of seasons, I don't think Wisconsin is going to be winning the Big Ten or anything, but I do think that they're going to be better than they were this year right away. And I think that they're going to be, probably one of the favorites to win the Big Ten West, as long as it's still in existence for another year at most, probably.
Braylon Allen, so cold-blooded, jumping on Twitter saying he's so excited not to have to face 9-man boxes anymore.
Yeah.
But he's right.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a guy that knows football and understands what's happening as the winds are shifting. I also have Fickell as my coach that is set up for immediate success, just because I don't think that while we had dropped off, it wasn't that long ago that Wisconsin was, top 5 in the college football playoff rankings. I mean, the general infrastructure and the bones around Madison are still very good, and Fickell's such a stud. My favorite, by the way, was Deion, but this is the coach that is set up for immediate success. I like Fickell here. But what's where are you going for the coach to set up for immediate success?
I'm going Deion.
Immediate.
Yes, immediate success. They won one ball game last year. They were non-competitive in almost every one of their other games. I'm just scrolling here. I think their lowest margin of loss so far is 43-20.
Well, and they gave TCU hell for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, and then TCU won by 25. Arizona State, they only lost by 18 to Arizona State. So, that's not too bad. Look, I think Deion got there. He immediately got Cormani McClain, which is a nice way to kickstart that thing. You only have to improve upon one win and being one of the literally worst teams, not only in the Power Five, but in all of college football last year. They were non-competitive almost every time that they rolled the ball out there. So Deion got them to change the policies, or they decided to change the policies in order to hire Deion, which is smart. He's going to want to take a bunch of transfers like he did at Jackson State. They're up to 23 transfers now. Previously, you really couldn't get transfers in there academically. The school wouldn't play ball with the coaching staff. So this roster is just going to be a hell of a lot better than it was last year. Also, what a success at Colorado. 4 wins to me is a pretty good success this year. If he somehow lucks out and makes a bowl, that's a huge success. Like 3 wins is probably going to be viewed as a success in Boulder this year if it happens. So I'm going to go Deion in Colorado.
3 wins is not going to be seen as a success. I agree with your point that maybe it should be. And I gave the example of Lance Leipold in his first year. They had 2 wins, but at the end of the year, they beat Texas. Like if Deion gets a signature win, somehow pulls off a big upset, and they have 3 wins, and you see progress towards year 2, then yes. But other than that, 3 wins is going to be, oh, was this a mistake? I think that's going to, and I agree with you, Bud, but I think it's just Deion. He is a lightning rod, and people have strong opinions on him, and they're going to expect them to go over. So let me ask you this though, Bud, because if we're doing it like wins over last year turnaround, then I might change my answer. But if it's set at 4.5, are you liking the over?
Potentially. I need to think about who else they bring in, but like Arizona's not had a good year in the portal. A lot of their best players got taken. I don't think Oregon State can actually be any better than it was last year. Like they seem to be at the very top of their range based on the way that they recruit players. We don't know what Nebraska is. Nebraska was pretty terrible down the stretch. Colorado State was one of the few teams that I think was probably actually worse than Colorado. Stanford, again, down the stretch, just as bad as Colorado was, in my opinion. Arizona State could be horrible, right? Like they brought in a bunch of transfers too, but they were not any good last year. Washington State, I think they'll be an underdog there. They're like big underdogs in probably 5 games, favored in probably 1 or 2, right? Like I think I would make them a favorite over Stanford right now. And then that leaves 5 other games where they'll probably be underdogs, but not massive underdogs. So can you run good in those? Can you spring 1 big upset and 3 minor upsets and not lose Stanford and Colorado State and get to a bowl? It's possible. Like the bottom half of this league is not doing well in the portal.
My concern, and we'll talk about this in the win totals later in the summer, but like the schedule starts at TCU, Nebraska, Colorado State, at Oregon, USC. They could easily be like 1-4 out the gate. And how does this team respond to a 1-4 start when everybody's all pumped up coming in, a whole bunch of new players? You get off to a rough start. It'll be interesting to see what happens from that point on.
But if they start 3-0,
if they start 3-0, they're winning. They're
going to the playoffs. If they start 3-0.
They could. I've played out in my mind go 3-0 in non-con and then 1-8 in conference play, but it won't matter. It's a success, right? Because the steam of momentum and of excitement that would happen if they go into Fort Worth and beat TCU, if they beat Nebraska in the home opener for Deion in Boulder, followed up with the Colorado State win, also a home game, then it really almost doesn't matter from there because we would expect success. It's obvious. He's got it. This is going to be it. We just get so clouded late in the season with everything else that's going on that I think for perception purposes, the non-conference schedule is going to mean more in terms of the way we talk about Deion. The first reactions, the first impressions are going to be strong in terms of the way that we ultimately grade this. Like Kansas, which got it 6, came out the gate, was it 5-0 start, but then that 6th win took a little bit before they finally punched that ticket, so came back to earth just a little bit. So I think that the start will be very important in terms of the way we talk about it. Ultimately, that's just talk. Danny, who's your coach for immediate success?
I went with Jeff Brom at Louisville. The fact that he inherited an 8-win team, he obviously, I think he could go 8-4 and they'll love it just because it's him coming back home. But I also think the ACC, the lack of depth in the ACC opens the opportunity for a team that's pretty good to go to really good pretty fast. So I think in year one, he could get to 9 wins, potentially 10. I don't have their schedule pulled up in front of me, but Jack Plummer coming in from Cal. I think he's shown proof that his system works with good quarterbacks. I think he'll be able to develop him. So I put Jeff Brom at Louisville.
They miss both Clemson and Florida State, members of the ACC Atlantic since they joined the conference, playing Clemson and Florida State every single season. The reshuffled ACC with no divisions and just 3 permanent partners. Clemson and Florida State, not one of the permanent partners for the Louisville Cardinals. That's good this year. That's good next year, especially with everything that is looking at right now. They do get Notre Dame, but they get Notre Dame at home. Their non-con is Murray State, Indiana, and
Kentucky. Notre Dame, maybe?
Yeah, Kentucky, Notre Dame, Murray State, Indiana. So,
Chip, I'm just pulling this up here. They also draw Georgia Tech, which is a great one to get because I don't think they're going to be better. Boston College, which we'll see if they're any good. Skeptical. Virginia, still no confidence in that coaching staff. Virginia Tech was horrible last year. Duke was better, but not.
Danny, I think this is a 10-2 team.
Yeah, Danny.
Let's go. They do have Notre Dame. So
like they could be a top 15 finisher that play like you could play at a top 35 level, not even top 25 level, and run good a little bit and go 9-3, 10-2 here.
Rip off wins against BC, Virginia, Duke, NC State, and all of a sudden you're looking up at a pretty successful season. I like Jeff Brom. That he for sure is going to be dealing with different goalposts than anybody else, thanks to his long-term relationship with Louisville, the area, and the university. It's a pretty good fit. Is it the best fit? We'll get our best fit from the 2022-23 coaching carousel. And after talking about the coaches set up for immediate success, who's going to need some patience? We'll identify a couple coaches who are positioned for success down the road and much more as we recap the coaching carousel next.
Why are we stopped?
Something bit you. What keeps you up at night?
Well, I don't think it's a 7-foot-tall monster.
You're not so sure it's a bear either.
We've never killed anything.
That's why you've never had it back before.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, we've identified a couple coaches that are set up for immediate success. Luke Fickell, Jeff Brom, even Deion Sanders in terms of the steps that he can take year over year. What about coaches that are positioned for success down the road? Tom, why don't you get started?
I mean, there could be immediate success here too. So I'm not, dismissing that as a possibility, but I just think long-term, this could work really well. Jamie Chadwell at Liberty. I mean, we saw what he was able to build at Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt in a short amount of time, and Liberty is joining Conference USA, but it is not really Conference USA anymore. Like, I'm just going to go over Liberty's schedule this year. I mean, the non-con will change, but the rest of it will mostly be the same in coming years. They start with Bowling Green, New Mexico State, and at Buffalo. Conference play begins with at FIU, Sam Houston, at Jacksonville State, Middle Tennessee, at Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, Old Dominion, another non-con against UMass, and then they finish at UTEP. Not trying to dismiss some of those teams, but when you look at the budgets of the athletic departments of these schools compared to Liberty, that is a program that will probably be dominating Conference USA for a while. So they're going to have more money than their competition, and they've got a very good coach. It just strikes me that the long term, Jamie Chadwell at Liberty is probably going to work pretty well.
Totally agree. The reason I put him in this is because I think Freeze was recruiting a roster to get Freeze a job somewhere else, and I'm not really sure what he's left Chadwell there. We already know Chadwell can coach. Like, the guy's pretty clearly a really good coaching coach. They evaluate pretty well. Liberty is going to have way more money than anybody else in the CUSA. And like Tom mentioned, the schedule, I mean, Chadwell's going to win 10 ball games a year once he gets this thing rolling. And then he'll be able to probably pick his job where he wants to go, I would think, or he'll stay in Virginia 10 years and bank 40 or 50 million bucks, and his kids can go to the same high school and not have to move around a whole lot. Like, that's not the worst life either, as you can consistently, win the CUSA. And if you're the best G5 team, maybe you get a shot to go to the playoff one year. Who knows? So I think this one makes a lot of sense for best long term.
I'm going to go with Tom Herman at FAU. I think the decision to move on from Willie Taggart is because Lane Kiffin showed you that you can win a whole lot of ball games. Now, life's going to be a little bit tougher as FAU is leaving the CUSA and joining the American Athletic Conference. But I thought that Tom Herman is in a position where he can build this thing out. And look, maybe Tom Herman wants a Lane Kiffin, fast track. Yeah, FAU gets you back into the Power Five. But if he does stick around for even 2, 3, 4 years, then I think that he's got an FAU team that is going to be competing to be a top 4, top 5 team in the American Athletic Conference. You hit on a couple right positions, you get the transfer portal going, then you might be able to compete for a conference championship. I think that, remember, this is a program, 20 years old? That's it? I mean,
yeah.
Like Howard Schnellenberger came in, got things rolling. We haven't had a whole lot of coaches to be able to really judge what can happen. But Lane Kiffin, I think, opened the door and showed you how it can work there. Willie Taggart didn't meet that. He just went 11-11 in conference play against Conference USA competition. I think that Tom Herman's going to be able to unlock this. And this is taking a step too far, I'm sure, but Tom Herman must know that he can unlock something special there at FAU, or else he would not have taken that job. So I like Tom Herman, if he does stick around for several years, to be able to be really successful at FAU.
They have a great stadium on campus. It's perfect size. They have new facilities. It's in Florida, South Florida. Like, you can attract a lot of guys, a lot of players who might slip through the cracks. And I think you're totally right. I think Lane Kiffin kind of showed you the blueprint of how you could win. And I'd be surprised if Herman doesn't too. I mean, I don't want to bash anybody, but the previous coach really kind of showed his hand the last few stops where he was not the best head man at the helm.
Yep.
Isn't there also the opportunity to look at players from South Florida who go somewhere else in the one-time transfer, and it doesn't stick at these other schools? You get to say, hey, first, these last 2 years have been tough. You're not getting to play as much as you wanted. Why don't you come on home? Why don't you come on back to South Florida? It would be more comfortable where you're at. Yeah, I mean, West Virginia recruits Florida. All these schools that are further north that recruit Florida, go find the players that are super talented that just aren't a good roster fit and not playing as much as they want to. You get to be a great landing spot in the transfer portal era for sure. Danny, who you got?
Long term. So I went with, because I saw Bud did short term. So maybe it was a reaction to Bud's short term, because I said Deion Sanders long term. When I said long term, I think year 3 is the year you could see the results. I know Joe Klatt, former Colorado Buffalo, has said year 2, he thinks they're going to make the playoff.
What?
I wouldn't. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't go that far.
Joel's so pumped up. He's out racing Ralphie right now. He thinks,
yes, he is. Back. He is. But he did qualify. And I think his reasoning made some sense, but that's why I pushed back on 2 years. And I would say year 3, because we're getting expansion, because USC, UCLA are leaving. Oregon, Washington, Utah are still going to be in the Pac-12. So you still have to go through those teams, which have been really good. But you're going to see continued growth of the recruiting prowess and the transfer portal prowess that he's already showed. So I would say if the school is patient with him, which I think they will be, why wouldn't they? They're more relevant already without any results. If the school is patient, I think Deion will work over the long run, and I think he will compete for Pac-12 titles. And I think that does put you in the playoff conversation. So I wouldn't go as far as year 2, but I think long-term, and it's crazy that we even say long-term is 3 years, but I think in year 3, you could see them contending for the Pac-12.
So we've listed some coaches that we think are going to be poised for success right away. We've listed some coaches that we think are going to be successful a little bit down the road. One coach that we have not mentioned at all so far in this process, I'm curious to get y'all's take on it. What are the expectations? What are your expectations for the Matt Rule era at Nebraska? Because we're picking a lot of different ways to break down this coaching carousel, a lot of different, jobs to highlight, our favorite hire, biggest risk, best fit. set up for immediate long-term success. And not a single one of us has singled out anything like that stands out about Matt Rule to Nebraska. So what is going to happen with Matt Rule's tenure at Nebraska?
I don't know.
That's why he has not been singled out
any of these.
in any of these superlatives.
I mean, I was when this job came open, Matt Rule was one of the people I said that made the most sense to me for Nebraska. He was somebody I think they should go after. And I think Matt Rule has proven from his time at Temple and his time at Baylor that he knows how to build a program. But I've just reached a point in my personal relationship with Nebraska where I'm not assuming anything anymore. It's like, I don't care. Like, I thought Scott Frost was going to be a grand slam for Nebraska. It just made too much sense. And we saw how it went. So for that program with me right now, I'm just in they could hire Nick Saban and I'm not going to be out here saying they're back. I need to wait and see it. That's the way I approach everything with the Cornhuskers right now.
I'll say the coach that definitely will do better than the last one
is Matt Rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do think he'll be better. I think he's more prepared, even though, I know Scott Frost, won the title in 2017 at UCF, but he was still a little green. That size of program, the scope it just felt like it may be a little bit too soon. I think Matt Rule will do a better job than Scott Frost. I just don't know if I'm willing to go out there and say with the confidence like Luke Fickell could get, 10, 11 wins at Wisconsin. I don't know. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's a risky hire. I don't think it's a bad hire. I just think I'm kind of with Tom. I need to see what this looks like.
I think he will do well there. The problem is the change of divisions, right? Like now, Nebraska was floundering at a time when it was not having to consistently play the best teams in the conference. You'd play one, sometimes two per year. Now you're going to have to play those teams much more often, and you have fewer guaranteed wins, period. So Nebraska is so much of a tougher job now than it was. Wisconsin as well, but Wisconsin has a little more proven track record that I trust. They generally have their act together, whereas behind the scenes at Nebraska, I don't know that they do. They might. I think Matt Rule's a guy that is a good consensus builder. I think he's very smart in his hires for the most part in terms of hiring guys who are going to connect in the areas that you need to recruit. A lot of this is going to come down to how many players can Nebraska buy, right? Because if I'm asking you to go away from home nowadays, it's going to take a check. And there's not a lot of good talent in the state of Nebraska. They will recruit extremely toolsy guys. That is Matt Rule's thing to a T. If you're super raw, can't play a lick of football right now, but you have really good testing numbers and you have length, they are confident in their developmental program. And Baylor proved that, I think, to a certain extent, and Temple as well, that they can turn some good football players out from there. So I think it's more likely to work than not, but I don't know that it's a complete guarantee that he's going to kill it.
He was able to have Baylor playing for a Big 12 title in year 3.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it with a group that, he started a bunch of freshmen his first year and they lost a lot. I don't think Nebraska will lose as much as that first Baylor team lost. Incredibly different situations, clearly. But I would say that if Matt Rule is bumping his head against the top of the Big Ten after year 3 or year 4, then I don't know, Nebraska could get restless. I'm very curious to see what they think about the expectations there. I don't have a fantastic read on that. And also, Matt Rule failing at the NFL level. As soon as it was obvious that it wasn't going to work out with the Carolina Panthers, everyone just said, oh, well, he's going back to college. Okay. All right. We just spent all this time with Matt Rule coming back to college in our lives. I feel like he's part of the old coaching cycle. So now we finally get to go see it. Welcome back, Matt. It's like you never left. All right. What about the best fit, Tom? What was the best fit of all the hires in this coaching cycle?
Oh, there's another one that I know you and Bud are in agreement on that I thought was the obvious one. So I kind of switched directions a little here because I figured we'd already be talking about it. I went with Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Auburn is a circus, so why not hire a guy who coached a game from a hospital bed in a press box?
I think it's a great fit too. Let's stop pretending. It's a great fit. I went with Jeff Brom. I mean, even when Scott Satterfield was winning, Louisville wanted to hire Jeff Brom. Like, he's the native son. He is Louisville. If he can coach a game with a bourbon in his hand and drop 50 points on people, I think like they would give him an extra $1 million bonus for that. He played there. He's from there. His whole family is mobbed up there. Like, that's the guy you go get, man. And the guy can coach ball. So I think it's a great fit.
The glasses will be clinking in the Angels Envy Lounge in Cardinal Stadium. Jeff Brom on the side. Yeah, it was an obvious one, but all right, it was best fit's gonna be Jeff Brom. Danny, what'd you end up going with?
So I wanted to go somebody different because I saw who you guys were going with, and I don't know if his family's mobbed up there in Atlanta, but I went with Brent Key, who was an All ACC offensive lineman at Georgia Tech. I think too, like, he's unassuming. He just wants to get to work. Like, I think it fits the mentality of what has won in the past at Georgia Tech. I also love that at least we saw a team that had some life and pulled off an upset. Like, at least we saw a team that wanted to fight and play for their head coach. So I'm kind of excited to see what he can do now that this is his team. But as far as fit, I went with the former player route too with Brent Key.
Yeah, the environment in like Georgia Tech home games are not a home field advantage that you're like adjusting your power ratings for, but there have been games and where it is a rockin'
Thursday night ACC games that used to happen. It was loud.
Yeah. And I felt like during a couple of those, I mean, he went 4-4 as an interim coach during this past season. And there were a couple of those wins along the way where obviously the stadium was not full, but you could look in the student section, like the win against Duke. You could just see that there was like a lot of energy there that certainly was reflecting what we had seen on the sideline with the team starting to buy in. So I'm rooting for Brent Key to pull Georgia Tech out and at least have them feeling better about themselves.
I think it's a great fit, obviously, but also I'm just skeptical of Georgia Tech's program right now. The AD they hired is a fundraiser. I believe that they hired him for a reason because I think they're kind of broke, to be honest. And I guarantee you that is the perception of Georgia Tech's job amongst other coaches. And I think that's one of the main reasons why they went internal, is because they did not have the money to assemble the coaching staffs that the guys they went after, that they actually wanted initially, would have wanted to bring along. Like, I don't think their assistant pool and analyst pool was anywhere near up to snuff. And that's why I think you hire a fundraiser at AD to maybe get it. So, like, I'm rooting for Brent Key. I thought he did a really good job when he was at UCF. I think the guy's probably a pretty damn good coach. And Georgia Tech may have, like, not lucked themselves in it, but like broke themselves into a good hire. I just hope that they give him enough money to hire the assistant coaches that he actually wants to hire.
So Hugh Freeze, and again, counting Luke Fickell here, were coaches that jumped from Group of 5 to Power 5. Deion Sanders and Troy Taylor jumped from FCS to Power 5. G.J. Kinney jumped from FCS to Group of 5 as he lands at Texas State. And so what do we think will happen with Trent Dilfer making the historic move from the high school ranks to the American Athletic Conference, where UAB will be playing in 2023? What's going to happen there?
All right, time for the biggest risk category here.
Yeah. I mean, because is it truly a risky play?
I had this as my biggest risk, though. I don't really think any of the hirings made this cycle are like a huge risk. You know what I mean? I just think that there's a risk in that UAB is making the move from Conference USA to the American. So it is stepping up a class, because Conference USA the last few years has not been very strong. And even though the American is losing some of its strongest conferences, it is still going to be probably the best G5 league for at least the next few years. I think the Sun Belt will catch up eventually. But you're hiring somebody who does not have the experience, and you're stepping up in difficulty. And is the program, as far as player and talent wise, ready for it? And you have a coach coming in who might not be, there was a lot of pushback on Dilfer being hired in the first place because of the lack of experience. That didn't bother me as much, because you always hear people complaining about coaches, retread coaches getting job after proving they can't do it. So it's like, you can't turn around and be as upset when somebody that isn't a retread gets the job. But there is reason to wonder, without that experience, what's the learning process going to be for Trent Dilfer at the college level? Because yeah, he won at high school, but there's still a pretty big difference in coaching a private high school compared to what you're going to be coaching now at UAB in the American Athletic Conference. So at a time where UAB kind of needs to hit the ground running in the American, I think it's risky because they could need a little more time. Trent Dilfer could need a little more runway to really get that thing going.
Does it make sense about like if Trent Dilfer got a job in the NFL as a head coach going from high school? I'd almost have more confidence in that than college because there's so much ancillary stuff that you have to worry about. And then in the NFL, it's just you're doing the same thing you were doing in high school. You're just coaching. You're just X's and O's, like you're coaching. Being a head coach at a college football program is such a unique job. I don't know. I just feel like that's the only. I love Trent, and I hope it works. I'll be rooting for him. But I do think it is one of the riskier hires.
Yeah, I too know Trent. Like I've known him for a long time, doing all the Elite 11 stuff. It's just that is risky to take a high school coach, stick him right in college, and he played in the NFL. So like, it's not just some random high school coach, and it's worked out in some other places. Like Deion had not been a head coach before, right? So like maybe it works, but I think the added challenge of going up a league and into a much better league, I might add, is important.
And as we've mentioned here before, when talking about the hire, like the dude is a football junkie.
Yes.
Like just like speaks it, breathes it, is so passionate about it. If he's going to be able to sell that on the recruiting trail and sell that elsewhere, then that can be a good first step. But man, it's going to be an interesting run to see how things go with UAB. Any other names or hires or anything else we want to highlight before we get out of here?
Can I just say that Dominic in the chat, he did drop Ed Reed at Bethune-Cookman. Dominic, just do a little just Google Ed Reed.
Him.
Yeah.
Just search on Instagram. That's where all the
that's where Facebook Live, whatever it was.
Yeah, that's.
Are we impressed with this overall cycle? Because
No.
I looked at this and I was like, I really want to use Luke Fickell as like my favorite hire, but he was also my surprise hire, right? And so like I've been filling out my categories. It was.
No, overall, it does not have the star quality, both in terms of program and coach, that we've had in some other hires or other cycles where, like, I mean, we just had USC, LSU, Notre Dame.
That's the thing. Like
Florida.
If we wouldn't have just had last year's
Miami.
if we wouldn't have just had last year's cycle with like 2 sitting P5 coaches leaving for other P5s, I think having Matt Rule return to Nebraska and Luke Fickell jumping from Cincinnati to Wisconsin would have been a much bigger deal. But I think in comparison to what we had last year, this class just kind of feels like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there were like 6 of the 20 to 30 most important college football programs changed jobs last year. And that's not what we got here. But interesting.
If you look at our year-over-year growth by month, just internally in our analytics, it's like December is like kind of flat. Yeah, like we still did well, but it's like what happened last December? Oh, like every major job opened.
Oh, the year over year, like the right. Last December when
November 22 versus November 21.
When Brian Kelly up out of nowhere is named the head coach at LSU, it's like what? Squeeze me? Yeah, yeah. So overall, to answer your question, Bud, I'm with you. It is not last year. But there's the thing that is the through line to me. In addition to like Hugh Freeze at Auburn, Matt Rule at Nebraska, Deion, the programs that are changing conferences and going through a coaching change amid the conference change. It's a big time. It's a big season.
But this goes back to something else that we've been talking about. Space out the calendar better because all these hirings are happening in a congested amount of time while the signing day is going on, the transfer portal is going on. It all gets lost in the shuffle. Space it out.
Let's go. Let's have a coach hiring window. All right. We'll have a cover 3 coach hiring window special. No coaches can change jobs until the window opens. And when the window closes, no more coaches move.
If you're going to impose windows on the players, impose them on the coaches.
I love it. Great suggestions here on the Cover 3 podcast. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.